The sea rolled beneath the ramparts of Storm's End in ceaseless, slate-gray waves, whispering ancient vows of salt and iron against the towering redoubt. Gendry Baratheon stood alone upon the wind-lashed parapet, the cold spray flecking his cheeks like a smith's sparks. Dawn's sullen light seeped into the clouds, limning them in pewter as gulls wheeled and cried overhead. Somewhere far below, the booming surf battered the stony promontory that had been the Baratheon's seat since Orys cut down Argilac the Arrogant. Yet Storm's End did not feel like home, not truly, not yet. He still smelled hot iron and coal dust when he breathed, still felt the phantom weight of a hammer haft in his fist. But the kingly blood that coursed in him, Robert's blood, had carried him into halls where bastards did not belong. Daenerys Targaryen's soft words the night after King's Landing burned had named him Lord of Storm's End. Grateful as he'd been, the title hung around his shoulders like armor forged for some larger man. Beneath the crackle of the waves, he heard again the cries of innocence in the capital, smothered beneath Drogon's black wings. He felt again the heat on his face, the reek of cinders and charred flesh. He remembered Davos clutching his arm, mastery of his own horror fraying as green fire popped in the rubble. And he remembered Jon Snow, no Aegon, his mouth a thin white scar, walking northward through ash that drifted like cursed snow. Gendry closed his eyes. The sea wind bit harder. He had sworn fealty to Daenerys as queen. Yet kings and queens were meant to protect, not slaughter. If a crown bought the right to burn cities, then what oaths were worth keeping? Storm's End's thick walls could not muffle the rumors slithering up from the Reach and down from the Trident. Grain stores emptied to feed dragon armies, spymasters rooting out disloyalty, ships conscripted for blockades. Small folk spoke the new queen's name with the hush men used when they named wildfires. Power, Davos had once warned him, is a sword with two edges. If you grasp it, be ready to bleed. Below, in the bailey, men trained beneath banners newly stitched with the crowned black stag. They were few compared to the legions a Targaryen might levy, but the Stormlands had not forgotten Robert's bellow nor Stannis's iron will. Loyalty lay buried in the marrow of these hills. Storm's End belongs to you. The voice belonged to Brienne of Tarth, arriving soft-footed despite her mail. She had accompanied him from the capital, escorting prisoners of war southward before returning to her isle. Now she lingered, silent as a sentinel at his councils. He suspected she lingered to watch him, Robert's last son, lest the weight of legacy snap his spine. "It was Daenerys who placed it in my hands," he said without turning. "It was you who earned it," Brienne replied. "The queen rewarded a loyal soldier. Serving loyally does not chain your judgment forever." "Judgment," he exhaled. "A smith's son made lord and tasked to judge dragons." A faint smile touched her lips. "I've seen lords with poorer tools." He faced her. "What would you have me do?" She did not answer. Honor forbade her from counsels of rebellion, but her eyes, blue and steady as Tarth's summer seas, acknowledged the question he dared not yet voice. 3 days later, the Raven arrived from King's Landing. It bore the unmistakable seal, the three-headed dragon stamped in black wax. The parchment inside was terse. Lord Gendry Baratheon, by the grace of Queen Daenerys Stormborn, erst of her name, rightful queen of the Undulls and the Rhoynar and the First Men, protector of the realm, I command your presence in the capital at the turning of the moon. Your counsel is required regarding the reassignment of grain levies and shipwright quotas for the forthcoming campaign eastward. Your absence will be regarded as willful defiance. He read it thrice before folding the sheet. The last line was a gauntlet hurled at his feet. Gendry summoned his household knights. The hall smelled of sweet wine and oak polish, but unease clung to the air. "The queen demands my attendance," he said, voice carrying over the long tables. "If I ride for King's Landing, every shipyard in the Stormlands will fall under her order. She'll take our timber, our grain, and should she doubt our hearts, our sons." Ser Harbert Storm, an older bastard half-brother of his father, struck the table. "The Dragon Queen broke her own city. What chance have we to curb her greed?" Ser Ellen Wild, proud descendant of men who bled beside Lionel Baratheon, leaned forward. "We could attend in force, a show of steel, not defiance. Remind her the Stormlands are no broken dog." Gendry's gaze swept the hall. A show of force would invite the dragon's breath. The small folk would pay the price, as they did in King's Landing. Murmurs, swift and troubled. Each night recalled burnt thatch and ruined harvests. Lady Brienne spoke then. "If you go unguarded, you bow to her leash. If you refuse, you declare rebellion. There is a middle path. Delay." "Delay?" Gendry asked. "Stormbreakers ride swift. Send ravens to Riverrun, Highgarden, even Sunspear. Seek counsel among those who question this reign. Daenerys cannot march everywhere at once." The suggestion floated in the torchlight. Alliance. Collective resistance. A new chorus against Dragonfire. Gendry nodded slowly. A Baratheon rebellion cannot stand alone. Robert won his crown because the realm rose with him. But Robert had two great houses at his shoulder, Ser Harbert reminded. "The Starks, the Arryns." "The Starks have bent the knee," Brienne said. "Yet their hearts grieve for the bodies in the ash, and the north is far. But there are still lords nearer who remember fires on the Blackwater, or Dothraki screams in their fields." Ellen Wild's eyes gleamed. "We write them all in righteous secrecy. We write like thunder hidden in clouds." Gendry looked up at the stag banners. They stirred in the draft like waking animals. "Very well. Let us send ravens in every direction. Let us learn who truly bows to the Dragon Queen's flame, and who only kneels because they fear to stand." The first answer flew back within a fortnight, carried by a black-winged courier whose feathers still smelled of brisk salt winds. Lord Paxter Redwine wrote from the arbor, couching his doubts in merchant's politeness. The Queen's requisitions, he said, were ambitious beyond reason and imbalanced in burden. He pledged barrels of arbor gold to any alliance that could restore measured governance. Next came a crimson-sealed letter from the twins. Lord Edmure Tully, freed from Lannister dungeons only to watch King's Landing burn, wrote with trembling quill, "The Riverlands are bleeding, their grain winnowed by Dothraki riders quartered without leave. Should Storm's End raise a banner of redress, the Trident may answer." He asked only for proof that Gendry did not seek merely to seat himself upon ashes. Ravens from Dorne spoke of unrest as well. Though Prince Quentin's line had ended, the Sunspear counselors resented Daenerys's demand for cavalry levies when their sands starved. From Old Town came measured silence, yet that silence thundered louder than rejection, for the Hightowers trafficked in knowledge. Each new scroll unscrolled over Gendry's map added weight to the path he contemplated. At last, word came from Riverrun. Edmure Tully would meet envoys at the inn at the crossroads in secrecy when the harvest moon rose. Brienne volunteered to ride north with 200 Stormlanders. Gendry insisted on riding himself. A lord who expects men to die must first dare death in their stead. Brienne raised an eyebrow. "You sound like Stannis." He shrugged. "I sound like a smith who knows the worth of the finished blade." They rode hard through the rainy King's Road, past burned farms still charred from the long night's fires, through villages where children stared at the stag banners with guarded hope. Along the way, small folk pressed them with questions whispered behind calloused hands. Is it true the Queen burns those who question her? Are the unsullied quartered in every holdfast now? Does Winterfell still stand free? Gendry answered as best he could, promising only to protect. Word spread down the road like kindling catching flame. Baratheons ride. The storm awakens. Men of honor question the Dragon Queen. Near Acorn Hall, they met a column of spearmen bearing trout banners. Lord Edmure himself greeted Gendry beneath a bent willow. Rain dripped from his graying hair, but his brown eyes were steady. "Lord Baratheon," he said, the title carrying a wry note. "Once we were both prisoners in King's Landing of sorts. Strange roads have made us lords." "Strange roads indeed." Gendry gestured toward the inn. "Shall we speak where walls keep the rain?" Inside, candles threw warm pools of light upon battered wooden tables. The innkeeper barred all doors save the back entrance where Brienne's guards stood silent. Outside, thunder rumbled over the green fork. Edmure clasped his hands around a cup of ale. "You wish to rise against the queen?" "I wish to stop further burning," Gendry said, "to set a limit on her demands. A monarch who wages war with dragons knows no limit." Edmure stared into the foam. "I fired arrows at my own uncle's corpse so the Freys could not mock his remains. I surrendered my birthright to save my people. Yet every sacrifice since then has delivered only fresh torment." Wind rattled shutters. "We have allies," Gendry said. "The Reach chafes. Dorne eyes its borders. Old Town hesitates. If we strike swift..." Thunder cracked overhead. Edmure's gaze hardened. "Strike swift, yes, but strike wisely. You must offer the realm something more than an iron crown of antlers. Who sits the Iron Throne if your rebellion prevails?" Gendry swallowed. "Robert's bastards carry no claim in law. Law has bent before, and you bear Baratheon blood, royal blood, recognized by the Dragon Queen herself." Gendry shook his head. "If we rise for crowns, we risk becoming what we oppose. I would sooner see a council rule than another king. But the realm knows crowns, not councils." Edmure leaned nearer. "Give them a crown they believe in. Robert's name still stirs hearts. Your rebellion needs that roar." A knot formed in Gendry's gut. He thought of the forge of sparks dancing on steel. Could he truly wield a crown? Outside, hoofs splashed in mud. A scout burst through the door, dripping. "Riders on the King's Road, my lord." Unsullied outriders, Dothraki screamers behind. Edmure scraped back his chair. "No chance this is chance." Gendry reached for his warhammer propped against the hearth. "We ride south," he said to Brienne. "Back to Storm's End. Edmure, ride west to Riverrun. Gather your levies." Brienne's hand tightened on her sword belt. "If they pursue, we cannot outrun horses bred on the grass sea." "We won't outrun," Gendry said. "We'll vanish." They split at dawn, Stormlanders galloping into the Kingswood's tangled shadow. Gendry's hammer thudded against his saddle. Behind him, Brienne steered a rearguard through briar-choked trails known only to bandits and smugglers. Rain blurred banners and soaked mail, but it masked their scent from Dothraki hounds. For 2 days they wheeled southward along goat paths, sleeping in dripping caves, sharing soaked bread and salt pork. On the third night, smoke tainted the mist, a hamlet ablaze near Summerhall's ruins. Orange tongues licked rooftops, and screams carried on the night air. Gendry spurred his mount. They rode in under moonlight, steel flashing. Unsullied archers turned first, arrow notches bright in torch glow. Gendry's hammer crushed one helm, then another. Brienne's long sword shimmered beside him. Spears rattled against shields as thunder rolled overhead. Villagers huddled behind fallen wagons. When the last spearman fell, the hamlet smoldered. In the center square, a banner of the Dragon Queen smoldered in a brazier, their victory shadowed by proof of her presence. A dying, unsullied captain murmured through blood-bubbled lips, "Orders, Storm's End to be secured." Gendry knelt. Secured. The captain's eyes glazed. The rain quenched the last embers of his breath. Brienne wiped her blade. "They march for Storm's End. They mean to seize your castle before you return." Gendry stood slowly, the hammer hanging from his fist. Above, lightning forked across the sky as though the gods themselves forged blades upon cloud anvils. "We ride," he said. His men, weary to bone, straightened. One by one they banged pommels on shields. A low chant swelled, echoing Robert's old war cry. Storm's End lay 4 days' hard ride ahead. Dragons might reach it sooner, but the Stormlands had always been faithful to their own, and a Stormlord who faltered now would doom them all. Dawn of the 4th day broke over Storm's End in pallid hues. Smoke curled from the outer bailey. Cookfires, not war. Yet tension bristled along the ramparts where crossbowmen peered seaward. Gendry dismounted in the courtyard to muted cheers. Ser Harbert Storm met him grim-faced. Unsullied ships sighted off Rain House yesterday. Dothraki riders mass at Black Haven. And, He hesitated. Dragons, they say, circle the Dornish marches. Storm's End has stood against dragons before, Gendry answered. We'll stand again. He convened the war council beneath the vaulted hall. Candles guttered beneath drafts. Stormlander lords, minor and proud, ringed the long table. Edmure's envoy had arrived with promises. Riverlords mustered. Men of the Trident marched with trout banners. From Highgarden, Lady Olenna's grandnephew Willis offered coin and grain, though no open pledge of swords. Dorne watched still. Old Town's silence continued. Gendry spread the Queen's raven on the table. Daenerys commands I attend. I will answer here. Let her come herself.
Seré Lingwilde Frowned.
Dragons will come before she does. Then we clip their wings. Gendry's gaze fell upon a roll of old parchments Brienne laid out. Stannis' siege plans, schemes to fling chains across the bay, to mount scorpions on the battlements. Stannis' parchments had gathered dust for years, yet the ink had not faded. An uneasy murmur rippled. Scorpions had failed at King's Landing, but Storm's End's walls were thicker, its wind unforgiving. Begin at once, Gendry commanded. Every carpenter, every blacksmith. Forge bolts as long as a man is tall. Sharpen them like the stranger's smile. And the realm, Brienne pressed. If we bar these gates alone, we die alone. We will not be alone, Gendry said. Send riders to every holdfast willing to stand. Tell them Storm's End is the shield of the innocent. Tell them the stag kneels no more. Lightning flashed beyond narrow windows as though to seal the vow. Night after night, hammers rang through Storm's End's lower wards, the rhythm of rebellion born in sparks and smoke. Gendry worked beside his smiths until his muscles screamed, drawing laughter from men and used to lords who swung hammers. Black powder from the forge clung to his hair and beard. When moon waned, he would sleep at the anvil, iron's warmth seeping into bone. Rumors gusted through the Stormlands. A fleet gathering in Shipbreaker Bay under Redwine Winemage's banner. Tully longbowmen drilling along the Red Fork. Reach lords muttering in taverns about the cost of dragon queens. Word reached Gendry of a secret moot in the Stepstones where exiled captains debated lending sell-sail fleets to any who defied Daenerys. Each scrap of hope was tempered by dread. North of the Blackwater, Drogon had been seen testing his fire upon the ruins of Harrenhal. Villagers fled, bringing tales of stone running like wax beneath dragonflame. And Regal, the Green, soared above the crownlands, a living shadow upon fields of barley. On the full moon, Gendry stood upon the ramparts as dawn flushed the horizon. Brienne joined him. Below, scorpions stood ready, corals glinting like stacked spears. In the courtyard, Stormlander footmen drilled, their voices rolling like thunder. You're forging a kingdom, Brienne observed. I'm forging a storm, he said. If it must break upon dragon scales, so be it. She regarded him. Robert would have been proud. Gendry exhaled. Robert won his war because Lyanna died. I would rather this war end before another Lyanna burns. Far off, gulls cried above the restless sea. 2 weeks later, a black column of smoke on the horizon heralded the enemy fleet. Red and black sails stitched with dragons unfurled upon the wind. Ironclads of Carthian design creaked toward Storm's End's Crescent Bay, escorted by smaller skiffs loaded with Unsullied. Upon the headland, scorpions were hauled into place. Stormlander archers lined the walls. The first bolt loosed with a thunderous snap, soaring in a high arc before lancing through the mast of the leading ship. Sailcloth fluttered down like a dying crow's wing. Cheers rippled along the battlements. Yet aboard the second ship, torches winked to life, and orange flares streaked skyward, signaling. From the far southern sky, a shape emerged, vast and dreadful. Drogon, wings beating like the sails of night itself. Fire danced across his scales. A shriek split the air, primal and ancient. Men faltered. Gendry's hammer felt small beside that monster. But fear was iron to be tempered. He raised his hammer high, and his shout carried across the ramparts. Baratheons do not break. Bolts flew. One clanged off Drogon's breast, sparks dancing. Another pierced the thin membrane of his wing, but the beast only roared louder. Then fire spilled from his jaws, a torrent of molten gold, washing over the foremost scorpion. Men vanished in crimson light. Stone cracked. Gendry unslung a coil of chain from beside the parapet. It glinted, barbed with hooks designed to lodge in scale. "Now!" he roared. Stormlanders heaved. The chain sailed upward, ensnaring Drogon's wounded wing. Momentum yanked it taut, jerking the dragon sideways. His roar became agony. Talons raked stone as he tore skyward, chain trailing like a meteor tail before snapping free. Blood rained upon the courtyard. The dragon fled seaward, a wounded shadow against the clouds. Cheers erupted. Men wept in disbelief. But Gendry's gaze turned inland. Where one dragon passed, another might follow. The war had shattered silence. Daenerys would come. That night, beneath smoking battlements, Brienne and Gendry convened council. A raven from Riverrun perched upon the table, message tube bound with trout-stamped wax. Riverlord's march. From the arbor came word of 50 red wine ships bearing provisions and Sellsword captains. Dorne at last stirred, the sand snakes rumored to lead outriders toward the reach. Yet the price of defying dragons was writ in the blood puddling among shattered scorpions. 30 men dead, more burned. The castle stones still steamed. Ser Harbert, arm in sling, slapped a map. If the queen marches from King's Landing, she'll bring the unsullied host. We cannot withstand a siege of that size indefinitely. Then we deny her a siege, Brienne said. Draw her north where allies gather. Stretch her lines. Gendry nodded slowly. Storm's end endures, but the war cannot be won on walls alone. We must ride. He addressed his commanders. By dawn, we march for Bitterbridge. Riverlords meet us there. If Daenerys seeks Storm's End, she'll find an empty she, and a kingdom rising behind her.
Serelin Gesetatid.
Leaving the castle unguarded. I leave 500 men with food enough for moons. The walls defend themselves. Let the dragons waste fire on stone while the realm unites behind flesh and iron. Lightning flickered again, as though the sky hammered iron. Gendry's resolve hardened. The storm rides, he said, and gods be good. May it never break upon the realm in silence. They marched at dawn, a column of Stormlanders winding through mist-laden forests. Antler helms caught the sun.
Vahoses snorted steam.
Villagers along the roads offered bread, salt, and tears. Prayers for a war that might finally end the age of fear. On the Mander's broad banks they met Tully bowmen rowing southward, trout banners fluttering. Edmure rode at their head, mail glinting beneath a cloak stitched with river rushes. When he saw Gendry, he raised his sword in salute. The men behind him cheered. Two peoples, long strangers, now marched side by side. At Bitterbridge, Reach houses assembled under half-furled banners. Merryweathers, Bulwers, even 200 men from House Tyrell's distant branches, though the great rose banner itself was absent. Willis Tyrell awaited in a pavilion scented with crushed grass, scrolls of logistics spread before him. He greeted Gendry with a merchant's practicality. We have grain enough for 60 days, ale for 30, wine for 10, my men drink deep. My uncle Garland rallies more foot at Highgarden. But the Dragon Queen's riders have scouted as far west as Longtable. We must strike before her host converges. Gendry studied the map. We ride east toward the Rose Road. If Drogon is wounded, Daenerys may hesitate to unleash him midst her own men. Or she may scorch the plain, Willis said. Then we meet her away from fields of wheat, Edmure interjected. On ground her cavalry cannot sweep, where scorpions can stand. Brienne pointed to a rise south of the Mander, a ridge called Summerfield, ringed with thorny briars and fed by a narrow brook. Conceal scorpions there, draw Drogon low. Bait for dragons, she said. Gendry locked eyes with her. Dragon's blood runs hot, but not cowardly. She will come, if the prize is my head. Thunder growled in distant clouds. The allied host moved by night, torches hooded. Scouts whispered of unsullied spearheads crossing the Blackwater, of Dothraki outriders hunting riverlords along the Mander's banks. Yet each dawn found Gendry's column already miles distant, slipping through hedgerows and forgotten farm tracks. On the 12th day, outriders galloped back with eyes wide. A great cloud of dust approached from the north, unsullied phalanxes, banners snapping, and at their center a woman upon a white mare. Silver hair streamed behind her like comet tail. In her shadow glided Drogon, wing mended, scales blacker than night. Daenerys advanced with the calm of one who had devoured cities. Her army spilled across the grassland, spears glinting, Dothraki war cries piping shrill. Smoke trailed from Drogon's nostrils. Gendry assembled his captains on Summerfield Ridge. Scorpions lay hidden beneath brush, bolts chalked with chalk powder to mark fletching. Infantry formed shield walls along trenches freshly dug. Archers lined the briar rims, arrows tipped in barbed steel. He walked among them, hammer slung over shoulder, speaking not of glory but of home. The smell of storm-wet earth, the taste of bread baked with sea salt, the laughter of children unafraid. He spoke of what dragons could never understand. And men listened. In their eyes he saw fear, yes, but also the iron spark that turns fear into strength. The sun stood at its zenith when Daenerys' host halted at the base of the ridge. Silence fell, broken only by the flutter of banners. Drogon's growl trembled through the earth. Daenerys rode forward, her armor scales of dark jade. Her voice carried across the field. Lord Baratheon, you stand as traitor to your queen. Kneel now and Storm's End will be spared. Gendry stepped beyond his lines. I was loyal until loyalty demanded I forget mercy. You burned a city, my queen. You burned the realm with your fear. Her eyes, violet and cold, regarded him as one might regard a cracked blade. Mercy to children has built no thrones, she said. Kneel, and I will forgive this folly. He raised his hammer. A Baratheon kneels only to justice. A flicker of sorrow crossed her face, then vanished beneath steel. She raised her gloved hand. Drogon reared, wings splitting the air. Gendry turned. Loose! Scorpions thrummed. A hail of bolts streaked upward. Drogon twisted, fire geysering from his maw. Flames roared over the ridge, but trenches channeled the torrent skyward. Bolts hammered into his flank, blood hissing on hot scales. The dragon shrieked, banking. Archers unleashed. Stormlander and Riverlord arrows fell like black rain upon unsullied ranks. Yet the eunuch phalanx marched, shields interlocked, spears leveled. Dothraki screamed and swept around the flanks, only to meet concealed pits lined with spikes, horses tumbling, men crushed. Gendry leapt atop a boulder. For Storm's End. His warhammer smashed helm and bone, each strike echoing across the slope. Brienne fought at his side, her blade singing. Edmure's longbowmen loosed volley after volley, while Reach spearmen pressed the unsullied, wedge against wall. Above, Drogon wheeled, bleeding. Another scorpion bolt struck his neck, lodging deep. His fire faltered, turning to smoke. He spiraled lower, rage eclipsing pain. Daenerys spurred forward, desperate, perhaps to withdraw, perhaps to slay Gendry herself. But a knot of Baratheon knights surged, antler helms locked, shields thrusting. Her mare reared, and she drew a short sword, silver in the sun. Gendry saw her lips move in Valyrian. Drogon swooped, flame kindling in his throat. Scatter, he roared. Men dove aside as fire lanced, scorching earth. Gendry felt heat blister his cheek, smelled burnt wool. Yet Drogon's aim wavered. The dragon faltered, twisting mid-air, wings laboring. The bolt in his neck jutted grotesque. Another scorpion fired. The massive bolt caught Drogon's chest, piercing scale and flesh. The dragon screamed, a sound that shattered courage. He crashed upon the field with a tremor that split the ground, wings crumpling. Dust billowed. Silence rippled, a pause between thunderclaps. Even the unsullied faltered, gaze fixed upon their fallen god. Daenerys dismounted, running toward Drogon, her scream lost in distance. Gendry saw the moment, saw the tide hinge upon a heartbeat. He broke from formation, sprinting downhill. Brienne called after him, but he heard only the wild hammer of his own heart. Daenerys knelt beside her dragon's bleeding head, hand upon its scaled brow. Her shoulders shook. Drogon's great eye, black as obsidian, flickered. Gendry slowed, warhammer heavy. 20 paces. 10. Daenerys turned. Tears streaked soot across her cheeks, but her eyes burned. "He was my child," she whispered. "You would kill a mother's child?" Gendry's breath caught. Fire and grief radiated from her like heat. He thought of innocence burnt in King's Landing, of mothers clutching ash where children once lay. Her hand closed upon a dagger at her belt. "You were apprenticed to a smith," she said softly. "You of all men know fires must be stoked. I burned a city to forge a realm." "A realm forged of ash will crumble," he replied. Her dagger flashed. Gendry parried with the haft of his hammer. Sparks flew. Again she struck, quick as a striking viper. He blocked, feeling would splinter. Unsullied surged toward them, but Riverlords intercepted, steel clashing. The war blurred around this duel. Daenerys fainted, blade aimed for his throat. He twisted, the dagger grazing his cheek, drawing blood. Fury roared through him. Robert's fury, sharpened by a bastard's life, and he swung, the hammer head catching her hip, not crushing but toppling her. She fell beside Drogon's neck, breath ragged. The dragon's eye focused on Gendry. A low growl tremored, yet no fire came. Blood pooled, steam rising. Daenerys pushed to her knees. "Finish it," she hissed. "Finish your rebellion." The hammer trembled in his grasp. End this war with one stroke. Spare thousands from fire. But to kill a kneeling woman was no victory. Robert had slain Rhaegar on the trident, warrior against warrior. This was different. Gendry lowered the hammer. "Yield," he said. "Stand trial before the realm you claim to serve." Her gaze slid to Drogon, then back to him. Grief warred with pride. "I am the realm," she whispered. He shook his head. "The realm is people." Footsteps pounded. Brienne arrived, sword drawn. Edmure behind her. Unsullied ranks wavered. Their queen imperiled, their god bleeding. Dothraki riders milled, leaderless. A hush fell upon Summerfield Ridge as Daenerys Stormborn, breaker of chains, rose unsteadily. She looked upon the field, a tapestry of broken spears, wounded men, smoldering grass. She looked upon Drogon and saw his breath slowing. Tears fell freely now. At last, she closed her eyes. When she opened them, pride had receded, leaving only exhaustion. She let the dagger fall. "I yield," she said, voice barely louder than a girl's. "Spare them." Gendry exhaled, the longest breath of his life. Brienne's shoulders lowered. Men about the field dropped weapons as if enchanted. But one figure did not relent. From among unsullied lines, Grey Worm advanced, spear leveled, face carved from rage. "No surrender," he snarled. "Enemies die." Daenerys turned. Grey Worm. Too late. He lunged for Gendry. Brienne intercepted, sword ringing against spear shaft. Grey Worm battered past her guard. The fury of loyalty forged in chains. Gendry raised his hammer. Shaft splintered. The spear point scraped his breastplate. He staggered. Daenerys cried out. She stepped between them. Grey Worm halted, spear tip inches from her breast. "Enough," she commanded, voice cracking but unbroken. "The war is done." Grey Worm's eyes flicked to Gendry, to the hammer raised but unmoving, to the dragon dying behind. He trembled. Then slowly he knelt, spear grounded. Across the field, Unsullied knelt in unison. Dothraki lowered their araks. A hush deeper than silence settled, broken only by Drogon's labored wheeze. Gendry stepped back. His hammer fell from numb fingers. Daenerys touched Drogon's scaled snout. "Dracarys no more," she whispered. The dragon's eye closed. A final breath shuddered from his jaws. Stillness descended like snowfall. For a heartbeat, all that remained was the wind, the soft rustle of grass brushing dead scales. Brienne sheathed her sword. Edmure bowed his head. Gendry knelt beside the queen. "The realm will judge," he said quietly. "But mercy begins here." She nodded, grief aged beyond her years. "Mercy," she echoed, as though tasting the word for the first time. Thunder rumbled overhead. Distant rain clouds swept forward, dousing smoke, washing blood from charred earth. The Baratheon rebellion had begun not with a charge but with a question of mercy. It ended, perhaps, in the same breath. A storm tempered, dragons grounded, a realm poised between vengeance and forgiveness. Yet the tale of rebuilding, the struggle for counsel and crown, the reckoning of lords and small folk alike, those stories waited in tomorrow's dawn. Tonight, Summerfield belonged to silence, to falling rain, and to a smith's son who chose not to break a kneeling enemy, but to bend the wheel toward mercy. The storm lingered on the horizon, its echo a promise and a warning. But for the first time since King's Landing burned, the realm glimpsed calm beyond the flames. Damp mist drifted over Summerfield long after the sounds of steel had faded, clinging to scorched grass and mingling with the metallic tang of blood. As daylight ebbed into a violet dusk, cawing crows descended upon the fallen. Gendry worked beside his men, hauling the wounded into makeshift shelters of canvas propped on broken lances. He moved from cot to cot with water skins and hard-crusted bread, sleeves glued to his arms by congealed gore. A dozen times he raised his hammer to strike a tent peg or pry a splintered shield away from a crushed rib cage. Each time he was reminded that mercy carried weight heavier than iron. At the center of the ridge lay Drogon's still form, towering and lifeless, a black mountain cleaved by quarrels. The wind flicked his torn wing like a banner of mourning. Daenerys knelt there still, silence in surrender, her hand pressed to cooling scales as though willing embers of life to spark. No one dared approach except Gendry, and even he paused at the edge of the hollow left by the dragon's crash, unsure whether to offer comfort or chains. He found he could not speak. The sight of the dragon up close, every scale as large as a shield, every talon the length of a sword, stripped language from him. In its stead grew an ache, not triumph, but awe curdled by pity. A thing so mighty reduced to carrion, a queen reduced to orphan. When at last he forced his voice to function, it was hoarse. "The pyres for the dead are ready. We will," he faltered, uncertain how to name a funeral for a dragon. "We can give him fire if you wish." Her head lifted slowly. Moonlight silvered her hair, but her eyes were hollow. "He was born of fire," she whispered. "Let him return to it." Her gaze moved past Gendry to the flicker of torches. "You fear he might rise again. Burn him, then. Spare your men their nightmares." Gendry studied her pale face. Streaks of ash and tears, yet set with resolve. "Flame will rise high," he warned. "The camp must clear." "Clear it," she said, and lowered her forehead to Drogon's snout in farewell. By midnight, a trench of fallen timber circled the dragon like a crown of thorns. Oil casks were rolled and cracked open, pitch slathered spines and wings. The soldiers of 3 realms ringed the field in silence. Stormlanders, riverlords, and reachmen shoulder to shoulder, bound by a grief they had not foreseen. Ser Harbert read blessings of the 7 in a voice that shook. A Dothraki bloodrider, captured and bound, muttered guttural prayers to horselords. No one stopped him. When Brienne stepped forward, she spoke no words at all, only bowed her head, sword upturned before her. Gendry approached last, torch in hand. At his side Daenerys stood unchained, guarded only by Grey Worm's bleak stare across the circle. She did not look at the unsullied commander. Her eyes never wavered from scales now slick and black. Gendry offered her the torch. Dawning surprise flickered beneath the emptiness in her face as realization passed. The man who had defeated her entrusted her with the final right. Her fingers brushed his when she took it. "I have no right to mourn among your dead," she murmured. "You led him through skies no man could fathom," he said. Send him to those skies. She stepped forward barefoot, hem trailing cinders, and thrust the torch into a seam of pitch. Yellow flame licked outward, crawling up dead ridges. When fuel caught, a roar of infernal heat surged skyward, painting faces orange. Men shielded their eyes. Sparks wheeled into the dark like a flock of fiery birds. Within the blaze, Drogon became silhouette and then illusion, a memory joining the night. The burning lasted till dawn. Embers rode the breeze, settling across armor, hair, and tents like silent snow. Somewhere beyond the glow, wolves howled. Maybe real wolves, maybe only the wind. Gendry's eyelids sagged, but he forced them open. The lord of this gathering could not abandon the watch. It was Brienne who draped a cloak around his shoulders and led him to rest at last. He slept on the harsh ground with hammer for pillow, dreamless and heavy as stone. When the morning sun broke, so did the fragile stillness. Scouts arrived laden with grim tidings. An unsullied company still held King's Landing, commanded by a lieutenant named Tumco, awaiting orders that would never come. Dothraki Khalasars roamed the crownlands without cohesion, half leaderless, half blood-mad. Food stores in the Reach, the grain heart of the realm, were threadbare. With Drogon dead, news spread ahead of the marching armies, igniting fear and hope in uneven measure. In the command pavilion, Willis Tyrell spread parchment over a table scarred by old sword gouges. "We hold 3,000 spears fit for march," he said, voice clipped by lack of sleep. "But I cannot keep Reach men fed on promises alone. Harvests are late and fields scorched. Highgarden can spare coin, yet coin cannot be baked." Edmure Tully fingered the small trout pin at his collar. "Ships from the arbor carry grain. Lord Paxter expects escort through the stepstones, but the old white corsairs threaten the straits. We might guide them north along the coast under Blackwater galleys, if we can trust Blackwater galleys." Brienne tapped another map. "The unsullied in the capital may still resist. If we advance too soon, we find ourselves pressed between Tumco's phalanxes and stray Dothraki." Gendry listened, arms folded, soot flaking from his leather. For each problem tabled, a dozen more simmered. Yet beneath worry, he felt a glimmer of something he recognized from the forge. Raw or being tested under flame, impurities burned away until only true steel remained. In this crucible of fear and fatigue, a realm might yet be fashioned. "Storm's End stands secure," he said at length, "but castles do not feed armies. We must decide which front binds us. Do we march on King's Landing to unseat Tumco, or do we hold the countryside, starve him out, and gather grain?" Willis hesitated only a moment. "A starving capital turns cannibal. Our fathers remember the dance of the dragons. I would rather spill soldiers' blood on the field than small folk blood behind walls." "Agreed," Edmure nodded. "But a direct assault with those spears alone is folly." Eyes drifted to Brienne. She met them evenly. "If we ride east to Bronzegate and claim the Rose Road, we cut Tumco from provisioning. Hold the road, hold the fields, hold the foe. The city will yield when hunger outweighs loyalty." Gendry's gaze returned to the map. "Bronzegate lies 6 days' march. We leave tomorrow at dawn. Riverlords guard the Mander crossing. Reach men gather grain. Stormlanders ride with me. Willis, send ravens to Old Town. Press them for wagons of oats, not letters of caution. Edmure, post outriders along every stream. The Dothraki drink courage by horse. Deny them water, we deny them raids." The council dispersed into the muted din of preparation. Only Gendry, Brienne, and Daenerys remained within the pavilion. The queen sat on a low stool, hands bound now by soft leather, more symbolic than punitive. Grey Worm stood just outside the entrance flap, eyes flinty and hollow. Gendry cleared his throat. "You will travel under guard to Storm's End." "I know," she said quietly. "Not chains," he added. "You surrendered. I mean to honor that." "You honor me because mercy suits your claim," she replied, but her tone lacked the sting of accusation. It fell more like weary statement of truth. "A smith's son needs a higher alloy than cruelty." He knelt to her level. "I don't know what throne, if any, I will claim. But if there is to be judgment, it must be by lords and small folk both. Let them hear your defense." Her brow furrowed, a flicker of the fire he remembered in her violet gaze. "They will ask for blood. They lost children to mine. Some will," he conceded. "Some will ask or your head on a spike. Others will ask to restore you, and many will ask for bread because they are starving now. I'll try to give them justice first, bread second, peace third. Maybe that order is wrong. I'll learn." She studied him as though measuring hammer strokes upon anvil. "A trial means time. Grey Worm will not endure you caging me while the tide of vengeance rises. Grey Worm serves you. Command him to peace." He regretted the words even as they left. Grey Worm answered only to his own ghostly oath to Missandei now. Yet Daenerys looked toward the entry flap where the warrior waited. "I can command him," she said softly, "but grief may make him deaf. Then I will speak louder." Gendry vowed and rose. Night brought cold drizzle. The campfires sputtered but refused to die. Far from the bustle, Daenerys sat alone near the charred crater of Drogon's pyre. Gendry meant to rest but found his feet drawn to the edge of the ashes. He did not cross the invisible threshold. He merely lowered to a knee outside it. "Does every smith talk to their steel before they strike?" she asked without turning. "In the forge, iron won't bend true unless it knows why you shape it. What did you tell the iron you shaped into scorpions?" Her voice trembled, not with accusation, but with wondering sorrow. "That I was sorry," he confessed. The rain darkened the ash around him like spilled ink. "I meant to use them only if the realm forced my hand. And the realm forced your hand." "It did," he answered, though the words tasted of smoke. "Will you hate me all your days for it?" She drew her cloak tighter against the rain. "Hatred costs too much breath." She paused, exhaled a cloud that vanished into mist. "But I will never cease to mourn him, nor will I forget those he burned." He awaited anger, but she only nodded once, as though the ledger of pain was balanced if never settled. When he rose to leave, she said, "Storm's End is strong, but dragons stronger. Remember that even dead things have shadows. My shadow may still kill you." The chill that prickled his skin owed nothing to the rain. "Then let each of us walk in daylight," he said, and withdrew. The march to Bronzegate began beneath a stark sky streaked in rose. Wagons creaked under wounded and grain sacks. Stormlander drums set a pace both solemn and resolute. At the column's heart traveled a wagon stripped of its canvas. Daenerys sat atop bales of wool, wrapped against chill, flanked by 2 Storm's End guards in yellow cloaks. Grey Worm rode nearby upon a black gelding, spear across his lap. He seldom looked away from the wagon. Children emerged from crofts along the road to gape at this queen of ashes. Some spat, some crossed sigils of the Seven. Most simply stared with blank hunger. Daenerys accepted each gaze as one accepts rain, a thing beyond halting. Sometimes she reached inside the wagon box and tossed a heel of bread to a child darting from a ditch. The guards never stopped her. On the 3rd day, the column skirted a ruined vineyard where twisted vines clawed leafless at the air. Gendry ordered rest. While men searched for clean water, a lone horseman appeared upon a ridge southward. A Dothraki outrider, hair bells jingling, eyes bright with fury. He vanished before archers could notch. Within an hour, arrow whistles and savage yelps drifted through the vineyards, raiders probing the column's flanks. Gendry deployed Riverland longbowmen in hedgerows. Brienne commanded a reserve of mounted knights to guard the queen's wagon. Dothraki struck in darting bands, loosing arrows and retreating into vines. Twice they tested the rear guard. Twice they fell back, leaving 3 dead riders and 2 wounded Stormlanders. As sunset painted grapes dull red, the raiders melted away. That night, Gendry found Grey Worm sharpening his spear near a dying cookfire. Sparks winked each time stone kissed bronze. Gendry crouched across from him. "She is safe for now," the Smith Lord said. Grey Worm's whetstone did not pause. "No one's safe until justice for Missandei." "You think justice is killing me?" I think justice is killing all those who smiled when bells rang over burned children, Grey Worm replied. It was not accusation. It was arithmetic. Some smiles hide under beards of guilt. They still smiled. Gendry searched the man's eyes and found only ruinous emptiness. A battlefield after the crows. Your queen has yielded, he said. Help me keep her alive to see a council judge both of us. Grey Worm's stare flickered briefly, perhaps at the notion that he too might stand judged. He resumed honing. If council kill her, I kill council. If council free her, I follow free queen. My oath is this. Flecks of metal danced off spearhead and glowed in the embers. Gendry left him to his vigil, uncertain whether he had spoken to a man or a blade already in flight. Bronzegate's walls rose from mist 5 mornings later, copper-hued stone glowing beneath new sun. The town's castellan flung wide the gates at sight of Baratheon antlers. Inside, hungry townsfolk pressed against cobbled lanes to watch the host pass. News of Daenerys traveled faster than horses. Some villagers cheered, others cursed, but none dared throw stones with so many spears pointed outward. Gendry set command on a low ridge north of the road, raising pavilions among fennel and lavender. Scouts reported unsullied phalanxes 30 miles east, marching in grim silence, but no dragons now shadowed the clouds. The Dothraki scattered after their last raid, without a Khaleesi or a living dragon. Their unity dissolved like smoke. Willis Tyrell arrived 2 days later, leading carts stacked with barley and barrels of lamp oil. His face shone jubilant. Old Town has coughed up food, 700 wagons worth. The Hightower Regent says famine is worse for business than queens or stags. He tapped parchment maps showing supply caravans snaking toward Bronzegate. Gendry clasped Willis's forearm. The realm will remember. The men will taste bread again. He appointed Willis master of victuals and tasked Edmure with distributing rations. Each man 2 loaves, each child half. By twilight, the encampment smelled of yeast instead of fear. That same night, Edmure found Gendry walking the ramparts of Bronzegate's old castle, watching lanterns bob beyond fields where sentries patrolled. You give bread like a king, the River Lord mused, leaning against the parapet. Bread is cheaper than crowns, Gendry replied. He rubbed tired eyes. I still don't know what they will crown, Edmure. A great council? A new dynasty? I lead out of necessity. The realm chooses leaders by need more than birth. Edmure studied him. They need a hammer more than a harp right now. They need harvests, not hammers. They need time to heal. You bought them time with that field of ashes. Now buy them laws. Edmure straightened. I fought for Robb Stark because he was my kin. I'll fight for you because you fought for those children. But no war ends on a sword's point. You'll sit a throne or a council chair whether you will or not. Gendry laughed quietly. A chair at a forge, perhaps. Edmure clapped his shoulder before descending the stairs, leaving the Smith Lord alone with the moonlit fields. 2 weeks passed in uneasy stalemate. Unsullied patrols harried supply wagons but avoided pitched battle. Grey Worm refused summons to parley, yet likewise refrained from rescues. Rumor whispered that he licked his anger like a knife, waiting for one true opening. Gendry doubled the Queen's Guard and stationed Scorpion crews on wagons rimmed with spikes. When at last a raven from King's Landing fluttered into camp, its parchment bore Tumco's concise scrawl. The city hungers. The officers quarrel. Release our queen or watch small folk die. Gendry let the letter fall into a brazier. He would not ransom mercy. Instead, he drafted his own missive, sealed with black wax impressed by the crowned stag. Summon representatives of all surviving great houses to Storm's End before the first frost. Sentence for Queen Daenerys will be pronounced by Council of Realm, not by single sword. Bread will accompany this letter. Choose peace. He sent the message on swift wings to every seat of power. Winterfell, Casterly Rock, Sunspear, Pike, even the Eyrie whose gates none had seen open since the snows melted. In each tube he included a voucher for grain or coin, redeemable at Bronzegate wagon yards, a humble bribe for attendance. Some ravens returned quickly. Lady Sansa of Winterfell answered with unadorned approval and a promise to journey south in guarded company. The Aerys Lord Robert Arryn sealed his consent in a tremulous hand. From Lannisport, the new Lord Lannister, reluctant yet pragmatic, agreed to send a voice. The Iron Islands remained silent. Dorne's reply was a scrawled flourish from Arianne Martell herself. "We will witness. Bring son." As houses replied, Gendry's council debated how to transport their captive queen. To haul her in chains would provoke the Unsullied, yet to trust her unshackled risked flight. Finally, Brienne suggested a compromise both symbolic and practical. Daenerys would ride within a cage wagon of wrought iron, its door unbarred at night, its interior furnished with cushions and books, guarded by 12 knights sworn to draw no blood unless commanded by the council assembled at Storm's End. The cage would roll open to all eyes, neither dungeon nor throne. When they presented the wagon to Daenerys, she walked its length in silence, palms brushing the iron lattice. "A dragon in a menagerie," she said with a faint, bitter smile. "A dragon who may yet breathe words instead of fire," Gendry answered. She turned toward him. "Will these words spare my Unsullied? If they lay down arms, they will be permitted passage wherever they choose," he said. "I'll swear it before all lords. And if they refuse?" He hesitated. "Then they will meet the fate they choose. That fate will bathe your new realm in blood," she warned, but the heat in her tone guttered like a dying coal. "Perhaps that is the only forge left." The procession left Bronzegate on a morning kissed by the first hints of autumn. A cool breeze swept fields where grain bent golden. The cage wagon rattled in the vanguard, flanked by stag-helmed knights and Riverland longbowmen. Above flew a new banner Gendry had commissioned, a crowned black stag standing beneath a broken wheel, its spokes shattered, a sigil of storm-breaking tyranny. The men named it simply the Broken Wheel. As the host wound south, townsfolk emerged with cautious eyes. Some fell to knees, believing deliverance at hand. Others spat defiance. Yet more offered silent bread. They had witnessed dragons burn them once. They would watch men forge peace or ruin with equal helplessness. On the 5th night, they camped near the Stormlands border where a shallow river cut through gray rock. Brienne ordered watchfires high. The road behind still glittered with torches of unsullied scouts. Gendry walked perimeter until moon traced silver across ripples. The murmur of frogs and the soft clang of smiths mending mail filled the air. He paused outside the queen's wagon. Through the lattice he saw Daenerys reading by lantern light. A tome on the doom of Valyria Willis had procured from Old Town's libraries. She looked up. After a heartbeat, he opened the unbarred door and stepped inside, leaving 2 guards outside. The interior smelled of parchment and lavender. Iron bars cast stripes across her cheek. He remained standing. "Our sentries saw Unsullied across the ford," he said. "Grey Worm scouts them. You fear he might attack? I fear he won't until Storm's End, where a strike could shatter council." He rubbed the bridge of his nose. "Help me stop him. I once commanded him with a nod," she said. "Now command is an act of faith for him. You broke his god. He follows only his grief. Then speak to that grief." She closed the book, fingers resting on the faded sigil of an exploded volcano. "And will you speak to your grief, Lord Baratheon? How many children's cries do you carry?" "All of them," he replied without hesitation. "They weigh every choice. Then you know grief is not soothed by cages or councils." She met his gaze, and in the lantern's flicker he glimpsed the woman who once freed slaves in a distant land. "You cannot forge a realm by hammering grief alone. You must give it shape. A law, a monument, a promise. Help me shape it," he urged. Silence thickened. At last she said, "Bring Grey Worm to me. Let him hear that my will remains peace." He nodded, relief tempered by caution. "I'll fetch him at dawn." As he turned to leave, she added, "Do you know why a smith's hammer is curved at one end?" He paused, surprised. "Curved to peen metal smooth after shaping. To mend what you break," she murmured, and opened her book again. Dawn's pallid glow crept over tents when Grey Worm entered the wagon at Gendry's invitation. His spear remained outside by the door. Gendry insisted. The unsullied commander stood at terse attention before his queen, helm tucked beneath his arm. Daenerys regarded him with gentleness that almost unbalanced him. "You served me when fire was answer to every chain," she said. "Now fire is gone. Will you serve peace?" He swallowed. Missandei wanted peace. She said no chains, no fear. "Then fulfill her dream, not mine," Daenerys whispered. "Lay down arms. March north, east, wherever hearts heal. The realm will grant passage." Grey Worm's jaw tightened. "And you, Khaleesi?" "I answer to the realm," she said. "I answer for the broken. Unsullied remain beside you." "No," she lifted her bound wrists. "Because beside me may mean dying for me. I refuse more deaths." The commander's breath shuddered. "Unsullied know only war. Without war we are ghosts." "Then become men," she pleaded. "Plant grain where others plowed fear. Guard children in streets you once patrolled as conquerors." She reached through the bars and took his gloved hand. Live! Gendry watched the moment as one watches a blade poised between shattering or striking true. Grey Worm's fingers trembled, gripping his queen's hand as though clinging to a ledge over abyss. Slowly he knelt. "I will guide them west," he murmured. "To Noth, Missandei's island." Daenerys closed her eyes, tears slipping free. "Noth welcomes gentle hearts." Gendry exhaled. "I will provide ships in Storm's End's harbor," he said. "You depart with any who wish passage." Grey Worm rose, fixed Gendry with a gaze still sharpened by suspicion but stripped of murder. "If counsel harms her, they will judge," Gendry said. "But judgment is not harm." Grey Worm nodded once, a sword sliding back to scabbard, and departed. Gendry watched him vanish into morning fog and felt a weight he had not known lifting from his ribs. Storm's End appeared on the horizon 2 days later, its titanic drum tower thrust from cliffs into crashing sea. Banners of broken wheels snapped atop every battlement. The castle's outer bailey seethed with new tents. Envoys of Winterfell, the Eyrie, Highgarden, the Trident, and more. Wagons bore sigils of bees, roses, krakens, falcons. Some arrived for judgment, others for opportunity. The caravan wound through open gates beneath portcullis raised high. Crowds of small folk thronged dusty lanes inside the curtain walls. They craned for a glimpse of the caged queen. Some jeered, others wept. Their faces were gaunt from lean harvests, yet their eyes shone with something like hope. A hope born not from crowns but from movement itself, from the sense that a wheel might break after all. In the castle's vaulted heart, the great hall of Storm's End, trestles had been removed to make room for a circular platform of dark oak. The council floor. Chairs showed the sigils of houses, none higher than others. At the platform's center waited a simple wooden bench, no iron throne, only a seat. Daenerys's cage rolled to rest beside the dais. Guards swung the door open. She stepped onto the flagstones, hair tousled by salt wind, face calm as mist. A hush rippled through the gathered lords, ladies, maesters, and mothers from fishing villages. Gendry ascended a step and spoke. "This council convenes at First Frost to weigh the fate of the realm and of Daenerys Stormborn, daughter of Ares, once queen of the Seven Kingdoms. We judge in sight of gods and men, and in earshot of every soul who wishes to hear. There will be no closed doors." A murmur rose. Shock at the thought of small folk witnessing judgment meant for crowns. But no one openly protested. The war had blurred lines between high and low irreparably. Among the crowd, Gendry saw faces etched into memory. Sansa Stark standing tall in northern furs, Brienne at her shoulder. Willis Tyrell conferring with a cautious new lady of Casterly Rock, one Joy Hill legitimized by war's upheaval. Arianne Martell in radiant silks. Even Lord Robert Arryn, thin and pale but resolute beside bronze-clad knights of the Vale. Torches flickered along pillars, painting mottled amber shadows on stone. Maester Olivar of Tarth cleared his throat to read the first charge. Mass slaughter at King's Landing. But his words froze as the main doors slammed wide and wind howled in. Every head turned. Across the threshold strode Victarion Greyjoy, Ironborn warlord, salt crust on beard, black cloak trailing sea spray. Behind him marched a wedge of reavers bearing axes. "The Iron Islands answer your summons," he declared, voice echoing like breakers under cavern arches. "We come not for justice but for plunder of weakness. Declare a king and we'll decide whether he bleeds." Steel rasped throughout the hall. Bowstrings tightened. Sansa Stark's voice cut through. "Threats at a council of peace prove only that some crave chains." Victarion laughed, the sound coarse. "Peace is a chain, girl Stark. Break it and taste salt." Gendry stepped onto the council floor. The reavers halted before the dais. "Set down your axes, Lord Greyjoy," he said steadily. "Or leave." Hammer at his side glinted. Victarion's eye narrowed. "A bastard plays lord with broken wheels. Wheels spin over salt as they do over land. The sea chooses no masters." Gendry remained still. "Then perhaps the sea ought learn from the land today." The hall pulsed tense. Then Brienne advanced, sword unsheathed, and placed its point lightly upon the floor between victim and council. A line drawn of simple steel. Victarion looked from sword to dais to the roof timbers where crossbows aimed downward. He spat on the stone. "The sea will wait," he growled, and motioned his men to the wall's edge. Gendry exhaled. Around him lords relaxed minutely, realizing that even in chaos limits could be set. He raised his voice, not to Victarion but to all. "Let it be known that in this hall each voice may speak, but no blade may silence. We gather not to seize but to shape. I will neither wear crown nor wield scepter until this council decides such matters openly." Daenerys listened from her modest bench, head tilted, perhaps recognizing the echo of her own past councils freed of tyranny. Or perhaps she saw in Gendry the smith's son who still answered Iron's call. One who forged by heat yet cooled by measured blows. Outside the hall, thunder rumbled, an autumn storm rolling in off the narrow sea. The old stones of Storm's End shuddered as wind whistled through arrow slits, but the walls endured as they always had. So too did the voices within, raised now not in battle cries but in cautious arguments about grain tithes, city charters, reparations, oaths, and the weight of Merc. As the first cool drops of rain pattered on slate roofs, Gendry felt the shape of days ahead, long, fraught, and riddled with sparks. Yet for the first time since King's Landing burned, the sparks would strike anvils instead of flesh. The hammer would fall again and again on law, on vengeance, on the hungry iron of grief. Whether the metal emerging would be crown, plowshare, or chain was yet unwritten. But the smith in Gendry raised his hammer all the same, ready to test the temper of a realm reborn beneath the storm. Outside, the sea boomed against cliffs, as if applauding or warning. Inside, the council's first debate began. Rain pummeled Storm's End for 3 straight days, as if the sea itself had risen skyward and found new purpose against those walls. Water sluiced from gargoyled gutters, pounded the drum tower's flat ramparts, and drenched banners until their colors bled together. Black stag on gold, silver trout on red, white falcon on blue, sun and spear spun into drifting dyes. Inside the keep, newly arrived lords and ladies crammed the galleries like anxious pilgrims at a shrine, each wondering what miracle or what message would spill from this black stone sanctuary perched above the roaring gulf. Gendry awoke each dawn before the first trumpet and walked the circumference of the walls, cloak plastered to his shoulders, boots skating across sheets of water. From the parapets he could survey the sprawling camp below, hundreds of tents stitched in cosmopolitan confusion, fires guttering under makeshift awnings, smithies hammering out replacement rivets for armor rusted by incessant drizzle. The smell of wet leather and horse dung rose up to him, pungent even above salt and seaweed. He carried a ledger in a wax-cased satchel. Each morning the steward updated grain levels, barrel by barrel. Each night the numbers dwindled. The lords of the council argued. The small folk merely ate. By the 4th dawn, Brienne joined him on his wall walk, feet splashing through puddles. She said nothing until they reached the windward curtain where the gale ripped at skin. "They talk until throats are raw," she shouted over the gale. "But none agree on first principles. Half demand your coronation before judgment. Half declare crowning you corrupts the trial." "I asked for no crown," he replied, wiping rain from his brow. "I want a verdict, not a coronation." "Verdicts die in empty bellies," she said, handing him a roll of parchment sealed with blue wax. "From Lord Manderley. His grain ships frightened off raiders near Maidenpool. He requests escort or he will divert to White Harbor." Gendry broke the seal, scanned the curt script, and exhaled. "We promised bread to every banner here. If Manderley turns north, this council will devour itself." He gripped the parapet until knuckles whitened. "Tell Ser Harbert. Take 2 galleys, fly the broken wheel, and find those ships. And if raiders refuse parley, offer coin first," he said. "Steel second." His gaze drifted inland where the stormlands bristled like a forest of spears. "I'd rather pay in gold than blood." Brienne nodded and strode off, cloak billowing like a wet sail. Gendry watched her until she vanished down a spiral stair, then reached inside his satchel for a lump of charcoal and scratched new figures onto his ledger. -100 barrels wheat, -50 barley, add 500 souls in the last 24 hours. The math of mercy felt like forging chain links from mist. That evening, as thunder boomed overhead and braziers hissed under leaks, the council reconvened in the Great Hall. Storm's End's masons had erected a sloping wooden roof above the circular platform so scribes could keep ink dry, but the rain still pattered through cracks like urgent fingers on drums. Daenerys sat on her bench, wrists still bound by silk cords, more ornament than shackle, her hair braided into a simple queue. She neither gloated nor cowered, but she did watch every speaker as though memorizing each blink. Grey Worm no longer stood in armor behind her. He had sailed at dawn with the first contingent of unsullied bound for Noth. In his place sat 2 silent Dothraki women, hair bells jingling faintly when they breathed. Maester Olivar cleared his throat, voice echoing among pillars. "We resume examination of testimonies concerning the sack of King's Landing." Scribes dipped quills. Lanterns flickered. Smoldering torches dripped pitch. The first witness called was a baker from Flea Bottom, hands shaking as he recounted the day Drogon's fire collapsed the orphan's sept and devoured his wife and 2 sons. He held up a charred toy horse, somehow salvaged from the ash. Gasps rippled through the hall. The baker's eyes never left Daenerys' face. She met them without flinching, tears glimmering but unshed. When Maester Olivar asked if he held the queen responsible, the man's voice cracked. "I hold war responsible." A hush followed. Empathy sharpened into confusion. Punish a single head, or punish the hunger for crowns? Next came a former Golden Company mercenary captured after surrender. He spoke of Aegon's hill ablaze, of green wildfire pockets detonating as Drogon's breath touched hidden caches. "No single flame knows what it burns," he said philosophically, shrugging at lords who bristled at fatalism. Then a maester from the Red Keep, his arm still bandaged, described tending 15 children seared by dragon fire, their screams echoing down stone corridors for days. He had begged the queen's officers for milk of the poppy. They had delivered, but too late for most. He recited each child's name. The syllables hung heavy as tombstones. Daenerys closed her eyes and whispered the names under her breath. A litany or perhaps penance. The trial's momentum seesawed between horror and nuance. For every voice demanding her head, another pressed the council to weigh circumstance. Her dragon provoked by bells rung at Tyrion's council, wildfire explosions magnifying the blaze, Dothraki dash killing those who might have fled. Yet at root lay one undeniable fact. The queen ordered the fire that broke the city. The question was whether one order should end a life that had ended countless chains. On the 3rd night of testimony, as candles guttered low and storm wind rattled window shutters, Sansa Stark requested speech. She wore a mantle of silver fox, no crown. She stepped to the circle, glanced at Daenerys, then addressed the assembly. "I came south for justice," not revenge. The North bleeds still from dragon fire in our memories, and I do not forget. But I have seen too many kings and queens condemned or exalted by shifting wind. Ned Stark died because the game favored knives over honor. I will not sharpen the same knife merely with a different hilt. If we choose death, let it be chosen openly, with eyes clear, and let us mark the moment as the day we buried Mercy for good. Her words stirred murmurs, admiration, and suspicion. Lord Robert Arryn bobbed his head as though agreeing to whichever verdict spared him further thought. Victarion Greyjoy scoffed, metal rings clinking across his beard. Willis Tyrell tapped fingers on chair arms, calculating. Arian Martell leaned forward, chin on knuckles, sparkle of intrigue dancing in her eyes. The sea of small folk in galleries listened as if hearing rumors of weather, unsure which cloud might drench them next. Gendry watched the tide of sentiment shift like molten metal. A smith knows when to strike. He rose, hammer left behind, and stepped into the lit circle. All talk faded. Rain hammered roof planks above. "I speak now not as lord," he began, voice resonant but weary, "but as soldier under fire." He turned slowly, meeting many stares. "I saw King's Landing burn. I smelled charred flesh. I buried friends whose ashes could not be sifted from the city's own. I do not deny the Queen lit that fire, but I also know a forge can only temper steel when heat is exact, not vengeful. If we melt her today, we risk melting ourselves, for war's heat still glows in every heart here." He faced Daenerys. She met his gaze. No plea, no defiance, simply naked attention. "I ask 2 questions of this council," he declared. "First, can a realm built on justice grow from an act of vengeance? Second, can peace survive if we ignore blood spilled? We must answer both, not one at cost of the other." Whispers rifed like dry leaves. Before any rebuttal, the main doors hurled open again. A blast of cold wind snuffed half the torches. 2 figures strode in. One a lean man cloaked in gray wool, the other tall in dark plate and a helm of antlers. The latter removed his helmet to reveal Ser Harbert Storm, eyes ablaze. He called across the hall, "Lord Gendry!" Raiders off Shipbreaker Coast, corsairs bearing Kraken sigils. They seized Manderley's grain convoy at anchor and threatened to torch it come dawn unless we pay ransom. Victarion's laugh rang like a ship's bell. "Salt pays salt." He slapped palm to axe haft. Gendry's jaw tightened. This could not wait. Bread equaled council's survival. He turned to Sansa and Willis. "I need 500 men, swift and sea-tested, by nightfall. Meet me at the Tide Gate." He pivoted toward Daenerys. "The council will recess until the convoy returns. Queen Daenerys, you remain under guard." A wave of voices crashed. Protest from lords unwilling to pause verdict. Cheers from small folk gleaning hope for bread. Grumbles from Ironborn thirsting for fight. The hall erupted, but Gendry was already moving, Brienne at his flank, Ser Harbert striding behind. As he passed Daenerys, she spoke so low only he caught it. "Justice delayed is mercy's ransom." He didn't slow. "Bread first," he answered, and vanished into wet corridors. Night swallowed storms end in sheets of rain so dense torches on the quay burned blue. Gendry's boots clattered along slick planks as he boarded the galley Fury's Enville, her hull still stinking of pitch. Willis Tyrell's contingent hustled crates of arrow shafts aboard while Ser Harbert oversaw ballistae strung with fresh sinew. 500 volunteers from Riverlands, Reach, and Stormlands squeezed onto decks usually meant for half that number. The air reeked of wet cloth and anxious breath. By moonrise, 4 galleys slid into pitch-black surf, oars creaking. Lightning ripped clouds, illuminating jagged reefs. Beyond them, the captured convoy lay. 3 bulky cogships painted Manderley sea green, flanked by leaner vessels bristling with gray sails, ironborn longships. Fires flickered on the cogs' decks, signaling threat. Gendry stood beneath the main mast, rain sluicing down his face, hammer in hand. He felt less lord than iron again, ready to strike Enville. As the galleys closed, ironborn horns wailed. A hungry sound, half wolf, half whale. Arrows hissed through sheets of rain. Many doused before reaching deck, but a few nicked flesh, drawing curses. Hard a larboard, Harbert bellowed. Furies and veered, ramming a raider broadside. The crash hurled men across decks. Gendry caught a rail, swung his hammer into the first Ironborn, leaping the gap. Skull cracked like an oyster. More raiders poured, axes gleaming pale. The deck became chaos. Soaked planks, clanging steel, curses swallowed by thunder. Gendry fought like the forge made flesh, each swing deliberate. The hammerhead dented a shield, whirled, broke a collarbone, rebounded off mast. Rain blurred vision but cooled rage into focused rhythm. He drove forward with Ser Harbert and a knot of spearmen, clearing space. Between flashes of lightning, he glimpsed Willis Tyrell on another galley, rapier piercing enemy throats with fencer's grace. Arrows from Riverland longbowmen slashed down, pinning raiders to mast posts. But the Ironborn kept coming. Atop the cog Deepwater Daughter, a hulking raider brandished torch at barrels piled mid-deck, oil casks. One spark, the grain gone. Gendry roared across the gale, but voice lost to wind. So he acted. He sprinted along Fury's rail, vaulted to the longship's mast rigging, slid down ropes into the cog's shrouds. Rain-drenched torch, but flame clung to oily cloth. The raider grinned, teeth glinting. Gendry landed on deck with a thud. The torch arced. He dove, shoulder-slamming barrel stack. Torch missed, skittered across planks into a puddle. The Ironborn cursed, swinging axe. Gendry rolled, hammer sweeping low, smashing knee. Raider toppled, and Gendry vaulted back, seized torch, jammed it headfirst into puddle to snuff. But a horn blast signaled new peril. 3 more longships cresting swells, black sails blotting lightning flashes. Victarion Greyjoy stood at prow, axe high, hair wild in gale. He had slipped from council to join the raid. Willis's galley veered to intercept, ballista bolt ripping through first hull. Victarion laughed and leapt from prow to Tyrell deck with impossible agility, axe carving path. The reachmen faltered. Gendry dashed to cog rail, whistled to a nearby galley pilot. Across rain-swept gap, he met Brienne's eyes. She had commandeered the sister ship Steel Maiden. She read his intent, nodded, swung tiller hard. Steel Maiden surged parallel, letting Gendry leap the narrowing chasm onto her deck. Together they barreled toward Victarion. The Ironborn warlord stood amid a ring of fallen foes, chest heaving, rain dripping from sea dragon pauldrons. He turned at hammer's roll. "Bastard Smith!" he bellowed, voice thunder's kin. "Come prove steel to salt." Brienne stepped forward, shield raised, sword angling for first blood. Victarion grinned wider. A maid knight first, then the upstart lord. Tides demand order. He lunged.
Steel run.
The two circled across slick deck, Brienne's measured parries meeting Axe's brutal arcs. Gendry waited, eyes tracking, seeking opening. A crewman slid him a rope. He looped it, readied. Victarion roared, feinted overhead, then hooked low, clipping Brienne's shin. She staggered but answered with shield smashed to his brow. He reeled. Blood trickled. Rage flared. He swung in fury, and Brienne pivoted, letting momentum carry him off balance. In that heartbeat, Gendry hurled rope loop over Victarion's shoulders, jerked hard, yanking arms to sides. Brienne rammed shoulder, toppling him against rail. Rain slick would betrayed footing. The warlord crashed overboard with a splash swallowed by storm.
Ironborn morale shattered.
Longships peeled off, rowing frantically. Some raiders surrendered, kneeling. Lightning cracked overhead. Following thunder masked their cries. The battle was done. Grain was saved. By sunrise, the convoy limped toward Storm's End, sails patched with canvas, decks strewn with wounded. Victarion's body never surfaced. Ocean kept its coin. The captured raiders were locked in Storm's End dungeons, pending council's mood. Bread returned to tables that evening. Ovens billowed steam scented with honey and yeast. The keep's courtyard thronged with people tearing loaves, tears mixing with laughter as hunger eased. Gendry distributed the first slices himself. His gloves still smelled of salt and blood. He delivered one loaf to Daenerys's bench. She accepted quietly, broke it, offered half back. He shook his head. "Bread for Queen too," he said. She tasted and let tears fall freely, swallowing hope and sorrow together. The council reconvened a day later, the storm finally broken, sunlight pouring through arrow slits. A different mood hovered. Gratitude tempered rage, as if the smell of warm wheat rose between vengeance and mercy and asked which truly fed the soul. Maester Olyvar called final witness. Tyrion Lannister, dragged from a quiet cell below. Shackled but dignified, he limped into the circle, chains clinking. Murmurs swelled. He had vanished since King's Landing burned. Rumor placed him dead, exiled, or drowning in wine. Gendry greeted him with a soldier's nod. Tyrion bowed. "My lords," he began. "What is broken may be forged again, but only if Smith's hammer knows when to lift. I stand here as ex-hand to the Queen charged. I counseled her to spare the bells. She ignored. I freed my brother, perhaps sealing my city's fate. My hands are not clean, but they are smaller than hers. I ask you, will lopping off the largest piece of guilt cure the disease? Or must we learn new cures?" Victarion's empty seat remained mute. Others leaned forward: Sansa, Arianne, Willis. Tyrion turned to Daenerys. She met his gaze with something like longing. He addressed her gently. "My queen, your reign began with a promise. Break the wheel. Fire just swapped spokes. Yet you surrendered, an act far braver than conquest. Embrace its cost. Teach these lords what surrender means." Daenerys inhaled, stood, unshackled wrists visible. For the first time she spoke louder than witness answers. "I came from ashes of my house, taught by flames. I believed mercy too costly. In Meereen I spared masters and they betrayed me. In Astapor I spared slaves' ownership and they begged for fists. In King's Landing I chose fear because fear felt honest." She paused, voice steady though eyes shone. "But I am tired of honest fear. If mercy costs a throne, let the throne burn instead." She looked at Gendry. "I will accept exile to Noth or farther. I will swear never to claim these kingdoms again. I will carry my ghosts to seas where their screams cannot reach your shores." Gasps, whispers. Exile hadn't been tabled yet. Some lords' faces tightened. Exile cheated hungry swords of blood. Others brightened. Bloodless verdict spared conscience. Tyrion bowed low to her. Sansa conferred quietly with Brienne, who nodded. Willis considered grain ledgers, clearly relieved. Victarion absent, Ironborn outraged were at sea. But justice demanded unanimity or close. Maester Olyvar proposed vote. Death, exile, or penance under watch. Each great house to mark choice on stone counter placed in urn of sandalwood, counted publicly. Small folk chosen by lot would cast 10 pebbles of their own, representing common voice. They voted beneath midday sun streaming through clerestory windows. Scribes recorded. Pebbles clinked into urn. Gendry abstained, he would break tie if needed. When urn overturned onto council table, stones tallied exile 37, death 29, penance 11. Small folk gave exile 6, penance 4, death lost by 2. A hush followed thunderous in gravity. Exile carried. Gendry inhaled shaky relief. Victarion's empty seat had cost Death Camp crucial vote. Lord Yohn Royce rose. How enforce exile? She still commands respect. Ships may hide. Gendry answered. She departs under veil escort to Noth with day's rations. Any ship granting her passage elsewhere faces blockade and steep levy. He turned to Daenerys. You accept these terms? She nodded once, solemn. I will not return. Tyrion spoke up. I volunteer to sail with her. Someone must chronicle ends as honestly as beginnings. Murmurs again. Sansa studied him, then inclined head. The North grants safe passage. So decree sealed. Within 3 days Daenerys, Tyrion, and 20 freedmen would sail on a single ship bearing broken wheel pennant, escorted by 3 Vale galleys to the summer sea. She would take no dragons, no unsullied, no claim. The realm would provide grain for voyage, and, at Gendry's insistence, a chest of books, histories she once cherished, to accompany her. When council adjourned, crowds spilled into Bailey where clear sky astonished after so much storm. A hush replaced thunder. People processed verdict. Some wept, craving vengeance. Others sighed relief. Bread scents mingled with sea salt. Gendry returned to Forge Yard where smiths hammered spear tips. He took a bar of hot iron, beat it into rough horseshoe, quenched in barrel. Sparks hissed. A boy watched, eyes wide. Ye. Endirwy offered him the cooling shoe, saying, "Luck for new roads." The boy grinned, clutching iron proudly. That night he climbed the drum tower alone. Moonlight glittered on black water. In distance lanterns glimmered aboard the ship that would bear Queen and Dwarf into uncertain horizon. He felt no triumph, only weary gratitude. Chains rattled within his chest still, but lighter. He wondered how history would name this day. The Exile Council, perhaps. The Bread Verdict. The Storm's Mercy. Below, lords negotiated tariffs, borders, alliances, the endless cogs of governance turning already. Above, gulls wheeled silent in moonrays, unburdened by titles. Gendry leaned on parapet, hammer resting against stone, and listened to wine swirl through broken wool banners. Not final peace, no, the realm would test itself anew. But tonight the forge cooled, and iron sang softer. He whispered an old smith's prayer to the Seven, to the drowned god, to Lawler, to every creed that might claim ear. Let steel hold true, let hearts temper, let storms break but not drown. And from somewhere deep in his memory, maybe Robert's roar, maybe his mother's lullaby, he heard faint answer, work endures. So he descended the stairs, ready to work again when dawn rosy-fingered its way across Storm's End, across a realm where wheel spokes lay shattered at last, waiting for hands to shape something better.